Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So far we've looked at two letter groups. We've reviewed the concept of connecting. We've tried to find these new letters in certain words. Now we're going to look at another two letter groups. The Sad, Dad, Ta, Da. So this is the Sad, here, Sad, Dad, Lad, Ta, Ta, and Dha. Dha. So let's look at the Sad and the Dad first. So the Sad is a heavy S. S. You say S, 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 and you say S, 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 S. Different way of pronouncing it. The tongue is in a different place. And then we have the Dad, which is kind of like a D, but it's not. So put a little dot underneath here. It's not really a D. So to say it's a heavy D is not really the case. It's quite different, as we'll see. So looking first at the Sad, the front of the tongue is similar-ish to the Sin and the Zay. Okay, it's similar-ish. However, the back of the tongue is quite different. If you look here for the Sad, this is the Sad here, the back of the tongue is raised. So this makes this heavy sound. The back of when the back of the tongue raises, it sounds very different. S, S, S. C, 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 C. It gets a very different sound. The vowel sounds different, and the S sounds different. So it's quite different. So the back of with the tongue touching the back of the tongue is quite different. The Dad is also heavy because you have the same process. The back of the tongue is raised. However, it's not really a D because the front of the tongue is not in the same place as the D. So it's not just a D, a dal, with the back of the tongue raised. Right? So yes, the tongue is raised. However, if you look here, the blue is the point of contact. Actually, the tongue is not actually touching the teeth, the back of the teeth, as it does with the D. Da, it comes just from behind the teeth. It's actually touching the side of the mouth. Right? And so if you put your tongue, for example, the tip of your tongue like maybe above your canines, and not above your incisors, it's not in front of the front teeth, above your canines, and then it goes, the side of the tongue is touching the side of the mouth. Allah, Allah. And for this reason, it doesn't actually stop like the dal does. The dal you say ad, ad. You can't, the sound of the dal cannot flow. You can't say ad, doesn't work. Ad, it just stops. Ad, you can. It actually flows. It's a flowing sound to some extent. So it flows to some extent. It's not super fluid, but it flows to some extent, unlike the dal. Allah, Allah. And so this is not really a tajweed course, not a course to learn how to pronounce the Quran properly. And so try your best. If it just comes out as a D, it's not the end of the world. Now, because of this raising of the back of the tongue, when you say S, Sad, and Al-Lad, the A sounds tend to actually sound like O sounds. A sounds tend to sound like O sounds. And so what happens is, we don't in principle have an O sound in Arabic, but certain letters will make heavier versions, and we will what we call sink or lower the vowel. So instead of saying, for example, Sada, you say Sad, Ah, it becomes out like this, Ah. And instead of saying Dal, you say Lad, Dalin, Sadiq, Sa, it becomes this sound, Ah, right? And in reality, all the vowels have this heavier shade, heavier sound. And the vowel is essentially the same. The fatha, the dhamma, kasra, they're essentially the same. The A sound and the E sound, the I sound and the U sound, they're essentially the same. But they're being tweaked a little bit by the way that the back of the tongue is raised. Then we have two other things, which are the ta and the dha. So we have the ta here, which is a heavy ta. That's exactly what it is. you get the ta, and you raise the back of the tongue, and it changes to a ta. Ta, 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 ta. There's a slight difference in where the tongue is, but basically that's it. Ta. And so again, you're going to have the same issue with the changing of the vowel. You're going to say ta, tala, taba, as opposed to taba. As a ta is different. So we have the ta and the dha, which is exactly the dhal sound, the dhal sound, but heavy. The, dha, the, dha. Right? So these two are both heavy sounds. Right? So we have the ta, which is the heavy version of the ta, the ta, which is the heavy version of the ta, and the dha, which is the heavy version of the dhal. So it becomes heavy by raising the back of the tongue, and it affects slightly as well the way that the front of the tongue is touching the place behind the front teeth. Ta, 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 the, this, the, right? So they don't exist in English. You can't say this. That sounds funny. Well, table, that doesn't make sense. Table, right? But they do exist in Arabic. Okay, and again, because they're the heavy sounds, they push the a to ah. So instead of saying ta, you say ta. Instead of saying tha, you say dha. Dhalika, dha. Right? It changes quite considerably. So these two here, the dhal that we've learnt last week and the zay, these are light. The, za, the, za. These are heavy. Lad and dha. Lad, dha. Li, li. As opposed to the and z. They have the heavy sound because of the way that the tongue is pressed against the top of the back of the tongue is raised. It changes the whole sound. So this is a comparison here. This dhal is in the word this. It exists in English. Za also exists in English, as in the word zu. Dad does not. It's a heavy D sound, but it's also flowing. The D you say ad, had. It stops, whereas the dad does not do that. You say al-ard. It almost flows. Right? There's some fluidity in it. The dha also flows. Right? It also flows, but it's heavy. Right? So these two are the same sounds. The dha and the za. The dha and the dha. These are the same sounds. One is heavy, one is light. Whereas it's quite different to the za and the dad. Different, completely different. Right? The dha. The, al, light, al, heavy, right? And then we have flowing, al, ad, stops, al, ta. This is the ta, and it stops, al, flows, al, flows. Ad stops. Right? So there's some points of comparison that can help us distinguish these letters. Okay. So these are two groups then. Sad, lad, ta and dha. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه